All right, good morning, everyone. Study day, Remax Ace and Consumers Road. Today we're going to talk about stigmas and defects and disclosures, patent and latent defects, disclosures, all that good stuff to keep us out of trouble when we're doing our business. So let me just go here. Okay, so we have to understand what our disclosure obligations are, first of all. So I'm going to put some people in the room. What's a disclosure, right? Disclosure is something that you have to let the other party know, right? So if you're the listing agent, you're going to let your the buyers know, the buyer agent know. But if you're the buyer agent, you also have a duty to disclose to your client, right? So it keeps us from future disputes. Okay, we rely on accuracy in our listings, accuracy when we're putting our offers together. So it's going to help prevent misunderstandings and surprises after closing. So people are very often afraid. They say, oh, you know what? My client doesn't want to disclose, right? A lot of people say, no, I don't want to say that there was a fire or a flood or, I don't know, somebody got murdered down the street or whatever the case may be. It'll affect my sale. But the thing is that if it's a surprise after closing and it's going to bother that person who purchased the house, then it's going to be a problem anyways, right? It's going to be a bigger problem down the road. So it's better to disclose up front because there's always people who don't care. They'll say, oh, well, I don't care if somebody died in the house, no problem. I'm still going to purchase the property, right? It's better that they know ahead of time because then you don't have to kind of like hope after closing that they're going to have a problem with it, right? So it's also demonstrating the integrity of the seller and the agent, right? And we're protecting everybody from legal claims and your reputation. You don't want your reputation to be damaged. People won't trust to work with you in the future if you're not doing your disclosures properly, right? So it increases buyer confidence too. When you're working as a buyer agent, you got to say to your clients, if there was something to disclose, they have to. They have to. We have the confidence knowing that in our industry, the disclosure should always be there, right? If there's something to be said. Aside from all of that, we have legal and ethical responsibility. So obviously RICO will slap us on our wrist if we don't do our disclosures or we don't talk about our patent and latent defects, right? And then we're also bound by REBA and TRESA, right? And then the code of ethics. So full disclosure, honesty, avoiding misrepresentation. And we have a fiduciary duty to our clients. So as soon as we sign that BRA or that listing agreement, we have a fiduciary duty to our clients, right? And honest and fair dealing with all parties. So a lot of times the RICO complaints come out and those people are saying anything where RICO feels that you're not being honest and fair to the public. You know what I mean? Even if you think you did a perfect job, you did all your paperwork wonderfully, if you're not proving that you did an honest and fair job, you can get into big trouble with RICO because that's the biggest thing they look out for is that we're being honest and fair to the public, right? And even to each other as agents, we have to be honest and fair. So what must we disclose? We have to disclose any known latent defects. So we know the difference between patent and latent defects. I'm going to go over it in a little bit. Anything going to be affecting your health and safety, okay? Property defects that are not easily visible that make the home unfit for habitation. Any environmental issues, so examples of that would be like mold, asbestos, oil tanks in the basement, something like that. Any title issues that you're aware of, any encroachments, easements not on title, neighbor disputes, fence disputes, stuff like that. And any known zoning violations. So failing to meet these standards can not only lead to your loss of your license, but also personal liability. And forget loss of license. Sometimes they come with hefty fines if you haven't disclosed something. Very often they make you go back and do courses. So you're back, next thing you know, you're back in school, right? To get your license off a suspension or something. So always advise your buyers to get a professional home inspection. Home inspections do not reveal latent defects, though. You still have to ask about latent defects. But sellers, you have to remind your sellers that hiding defects can lead to legal consequences. So what are some examples that happens after? So a buyer discovers mold in the attic after closing, right? A buyer learns from a neighbor that a violent crime happened in the home. It doesn't even matter about the home. I know we focus a lot, like this is my listing and it happened down the street. That's a disclosure you should still do too, because people might be bothered by the fact that happened on the street. For instance, I remember that in Brampton, in my last brokerage, we had a problem with a property one of our agents had sold. They sold it and the buyer found out afterwards that they moved in that there had been a big drug bust. There was a grow up across the street, right? And see, we would say, who cares about that? It's not affecting the home, it's affecting, down the street. But the person had a really big problem with it and ended up going and suing, and our agent got fined because if you did a simple Google search, you could see that this had happened. They were very concerned that the neighborhood wasn't safe. They were very concerned that those people might be hanging around that property still, right? So it's a big disclosure, right? So I always say when you're purchasing a property or even when you're listing a property, do a quick Google search. But also, have you guys ever checked out House Creep? We can go on House Creep in a minute if we have time during this the training. House Creep is a really good resource because you just type in your address and it'll come up with all the things that happen within a certain vicinity of you, of that property. So it'll be like, oh yeah, there was this fire, or there was this violent crime, or there was this drug bust, or there was this grow up close to this address. And it goes back quite far. Good morning, how are you? So make sure you do your searches and make sure you're checking online. Like I say, a simple Google search can save your life, right? And then anyways, so a buyer learns that there's a violent crime happening in the home. Our seller knows that the basement floods during heavy rain, but patched it up before listing, or maybe is selling it in the summertime and it's not raining that much, right? Or like, for instance, we had a listing, not a listing, sorry, we purchased a property up in Peterborough for a client. And when we did the home inspection, you have to learn how to protect your clients. We found that the quarter round around the carpeting, the home inspector says it looks like there might have been water on it. We said, okay, fine, no problem. So our client was really concerned about it, and we asked the listing agent. And the listing agent said, no. I asked my seller, and my seller says there's not a problem. And I said, okay, well, it's strange. It's new carpeting, but the quarter round looks like there's damage on it. So what we did is, just to ensure that everything was fine, we went and we had the listing agent say, well, our client's not firming up unless your seller gives it to us in writing. Right enough. This was just before winter. She was purchasing. The winter came, the snow started thawing, and then the basement leaked. So, hi, good morning. How are you? So then we went back on the seller and we said, hey, we called the listing agent, obviously. And we said, hey, you said there wasn't a problem. And we were already aware because we saw that water on the quarter round, right? And so our client was protected at the end of the day. They went lawyer to lawyer and got money to fix that part of the basement, right? So you have to do a little investigative work yourself. Like I say, I push with anybody we train, and any agent that comes to me and says, should I do this disclosure? My answer is always yes. It's always yes. Even if you think it's going to ruin your sale or it's going to hurt, the value or whatever the case may be, it's better to do the disclosure up front, because anybody who's going to be worried about it, it becomes a much bigger problem after the fact, right? What happens when your disclosures go wrong? So obviously there can be legal claims for misrepresentation or negligence. You can get canceled deals, deposits in dispute and court battles, damage to your reputation, career, even your brokerage. You won't be a trusted agent if you're not doing your disclosures properly. And fines or disciplinary action from RICO or CREB. So common examples of things we get in trouble. Good morning, how are you? Failure to disclose a known history of the basement flooding, like I said, omitting mention of unauthorized renovations. So did they not pull a permit when they put that deck out or the fence or whatever the case may be? Not revealing the property was previously a grow up. That's a big one. And good morning, telling buyers the home is problem free when you know otherwise, right? So even if you're just the buyer agent and didn't know, you should have known or failed to make the proper inquiry. So it's not just the listing agent. That's why I keep on pushing that. Like I say, in the Peterborough case with that property, we were the purchasers, right? And even though we asked the listing agent asked the sellers. Now, we don't know if they're lying, they didn't know, but I'm pretty sure if you're the owner of the property, you're going to know that that basement's flooding whenever you're getting the thaw in the spring, right? So we had to do something to protect our client. So we went that further step and got that email from that seller saying, no, there is no problem. There is no existing problem when there really was. So disclosure is protection for your clients, for your career, and for integrity of the transaction. When in doubt, disclose, document, and advise. Always, right? Get it in writing. So disclosure isn't only about problems to the property. We have a lot of disclosures. I'm kind of focusing on patent and latent defects today and stigmatized properties, but it isn't only about that 100% of the time. So I just pulled an example of all the forms that we have in our library there. So we have the seller property information statement, the SPIS. Every time we load our listing, they always say yes or no. Now, as a habit, generally, I like to go through the SPIS with the clients anyways, even if I never put them with my listing, because it goes over, age of the roof, any known problems with the property, any improvements that you've done. When did you do them? Did you do them with permit? All of that stuff. So if you look at that Form 220, it's good to go through that with the client. Now, I always talk about the pros and cons here I put with the client. I never load it with their listing because should their information be wrong, then the buyer can come back. So I think it's kind of a tricky thing to put up with your listing. If they say, oh, I did the roof in 2022 and their memory's bad and they really did it in 2020, that's something that, the buyer can go back on them for. But it's a really good form. Look up 220 and go through it. It's a really good habit to get into. It'll get you used to asking these questions to bring out these disclosures from your clients, right? Then we have Form 299. So if there is a problem and your client is just going to sell it, like the basement does leak every spring when we get the thaw. But honestly, the rest of the year, it's perfectly fine. There is our Form 299, and that's seller disclosure latent defect. You can fill out that form and take a look at it. And then aside from it being a problem with the actual property, there's other disclosures we do. So 160 and 161 is, this is a form that we mostly fill out. If you're related to the person or if you're the owner of the property, that's our disclosure for the acquisition or disposition of the property. 160 and 161 are the common ones. And then we have our disclosure for multiple representation, right? So if you guys have multiple representation, you should be filling out these forms. So there's 325, 26, 27, and 28. They're basically just if you're representing the seller, the buyer, the tenant, and landlord, you're going to get both parties to sign those. Every time you have multiple representation, you should be signing those because that's a disclosure form, okay? So take a look at those as well. And if I have time, I'm going to bring up as many as I can. And then 602 is disclosure for interest-bearing deposits and services to seller, if you look at that one. So if we rarely get interest in our deposit, it's a form. I don't think I've ever used this form, but usually it's in bigger transactions when you have a larger deposit, right? Because we all know that they take it away with the admin fee and, they charge all of that and you don't really get interest unless it's a very large deposit. And then 610 is if you're getting a referral fee or a finder's fee or some kind of reward for the transaction, you have to disclose that to your clients as well. So we have all those disclosure forms in our library there. You can take a look and just check them out, get familiar with them, and know they exist at least so you know that you have to use them in those instances. So then we go on for a stigmatized property. So stigmatized property is really funny because it isn't something that's necessarily tangible, right, that you can talk about. Mm-hmm. So a property that might be psychologically impacted by events. So we see those disclosures that nobody's died in the property, right? If there was a crime, if it's considered the haunted house in the neighborhood. And these things might seem silly to all of us, but if there's something that can evoke an emotion from the buyer and they might be upset about it, we still have to disclose the stigma in the property. So some examples, if there was a death or suicide. So some people might be bothered that it was a suicide, but might not be bothered if somebody died naturally in their sleep in their home, for instance. But it's always good to disclose. If there's criminal activity, like a drug lab or a brothel, or I've seen it. I've seen it in properties. You walk and there's like a whole lot of matches all over. You're like, what? Or if there's paranormal activity, right? So we don't have a legal obligation, technically, to disclose these. But why it's good, like I say over and over again, it's better to disclose because if it evokes that emotion and the buyer is going to be upset about it, you're going to have a problem with the deal, right? So we're going to talk about RICO's guidance on stigmas in a minute. And it's just, again, the importance of asking your sellers and documenting. Because you don't live in the house you don't know, right? I know when I was growing up, my cousins all lived on this one street and there was that one house that was vacant forever and everybody said it was the haunted house, right? So I don't know. I hope that realtor made their disclosure when they sold that house. So this is what you need to be concerned about. What's RICO's official position on stigmatized properties? So RICO provides us guidance on how we should handle these issues. We must be honest. We must be truthful to direct questions about stigmatized issues if you know the answer. So did someone die in the house? You must not lie or mislead And if you know someone died in the home, you must answer honestly. So if you know someone died in the home, but the other agent's asking you, and you say, I don't know, or I'm not sure, or my seller didn't say anything like that, and RICO can turn around and say, you were acting not in an honest manner. So no duty to volunteer information, though. Unless the stigma involves material latent defect, RICO does not actually require the agents or sellers to proactively disclose stigmas. So we don't have to put in our listing, the person died in their home, unless we're directly asked. That's why very often you see that clause that comes in about unnatural or natural death in the property is very often in the offer process. It's in the schedule, right? It's not in the Schedule B from the listing agent. It's usually in the offer, right? So we don't have to bring it up, but you can't lie if you're asked directly, and you should document and question the question and your response. So RICO recommends best practices to protect yourself and your clients. Ask the sellers about anything that could be considered a stigma. So when I was in real estate school, I always laughed because how far do you take it? Like we always said, we were laughing about that, but at least that's actually something, right? But what about like paranormal activity or the haunted house we talk about, right? And I remember the teacher, because Oria still existed back then, it wasn't in Humber. And I was in Oria College, and the teacher at that time says, look, if your client says the wardrobe leads to Narnia, you guys ever read that book, The Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe? Well, then, you're going to put that in your disclosure. So I always laugh that it's so silly like that. But if you know and they disclose it, then you got to let everybody know. Advise sellers of their option. Disclose, say nothing, or offer to answer if asked, right? Those are your three things. I always tell people to disclose, right? And discuss stigmas with buyers early. Ask if they have concerns about these issues. So know your buyer. If they're really concerned about it, make sure that you're putting that in the offer for them. Like I say, we very often see it in our Schedule A in the offer process. If you're offering on a property and you know that this bothers your client because they might have asked you once or twice, make sure you're including that in every offer you're putting for them. Document all stigma-related conversations in writing or in your CRM. And when in doubt, disclose or recommend that the buyers do further investigation. So if we're unsure, or if your client says, I thought I heard something about this area, that there was some big drug bust or whatever, make sure you're trying to do proactively. Like I said, that website House Creep is pretty good when you go and you search on it. What you cannot do according to RICO, you cannot intentionally withhold information if it's requested directly, and you cannot make false or misleading statements. You can't discourage your clients from disclosing stigmas that could reasonably affect a buyer's decision. Okay. So your best practices are ask buyers if they have concerns about your stigma, know your client, right? Be honest if asked directly. And if in doubt, disclose or recommend independent investigation. So always, with stigmas, it's hard, but especially with patent and latent defects, you want to go and you want to see what the issue is. So what is the difference between a patent and latent defect? Do we know? Yeah. Exactly. So the patent defect is visible issue that a buyer could easily see during a showing or a home inspection. And the latent defect is the hidden issue and not visible upon inspection. So if you're walking through the property and there's mold on the ceiling, that's a patent defect, right? So the person would know to ask a question about that. Hey, did you have a leak in the washroom upstairs? Is there a problem with the roof? Why is there that mold patch? Latent defect would be something behind the walls. Yeah, like maybe they had a previous fire, they slapped some drywall on top of it, and you don't see the woods or the stud behind it that's burned, right? So we're not required to disclose a patent defect because we're supposed to be saying, okay, well, you're walking through, you can see there's a crack on the floor, or you can see that there's mold, right? Still a good idea. If you know that the client has had a problem with that washroom, you can say, yeah, we're aware that there's a patch of mold there in the disclosure. The bathroom leaked, it's been fixed, and it shouldn't cause a problem going forward, but there is that patch of mold there. It's a good idea to disclose it anyways, but they're just saying that we're not required to. The latent defect, we must disclose it if known and materially affect the value or safety, right? So like mold, big health problem, obviously. So some examples are patent defects, visible or discoverable by an ordinary home inspection, right? it's the buyer's responsibility technically. And the examples would be like cracks in walls, broken windows, damaged flooring, missing shingles on the roof. Latent defect is hidden and not discoverable through ordinary inspection. And it's the seller's responsibility to disclose if known. And it's hard to prove that you don't know it when you're living in the property, right? So examples would be like foundation issues behind drywall, leaking roof not visible during showing, leaky foundation behind drywall, illegal wiring, prior fire damage, hidden by repairs, et cetera, right? So I have another document here I wanted to share with you guys. Let's see here. Do you have any questions so far? Have you guys ever had a problem with disclosure or ever had a seller that didn't really want to disclose anything? We had one on Vermorton. We were selling oh yeah, sorry. Did you have a question?
Not question. I had one issue one time. When near Clinton area, the seller, there's a townhouse.
Yeah.
So what the seller did, he made a room in the garage. Outside it looks like garage.
Yeah.
But on inside is a room.
Yeah.
So they put it 4+1. That is the plus.
Uh-oh.
From outside, everything is garage.
Yeah.
Door.
Yeah.
Inside is a room and a washroom. And there's a condo townhouse. So corporation involved.
Right.
And then, so one time what happened, and the manhole thing is in the room.
Right.
So the water, I think, came out or something like that. So it is like water come up. So then the manhole said, who made this one? Yes, seller made them. Then we talked to him. They asked him, but eventually they saw it. They check out everything.
Yeah.
And they made it at the garage again. And then sit down.
Crazy, right? I know people do crazy things. So we had a seller on Vermorton. We were selling a property in Vermorton, and our seller's like, I don't want to disclose that I had a fire. I fixed it all, so I don't want to disclose that I had a fire. And we were like, but you should, and especially now that you've told us that, we should, right? We have to do the disclosure. And he was like, no. We're like, don't worry, it's not going to affect your sale because anybody who doesn't care is going to come and do a proper inspection. They're going to see whatever. You'll be fine. Well, right enough, we put the property up for sale. We didn't know one of our colleagues lived right in the area. And he goes, hey, I saw you guys put that house up for sale that was on fire, right? So other people know, other agents know. So imagine if you weren't doing your disclosures, you're going to get very easily caught. It's not something you can hide, you know what I mean? Or you should be hiding. So
same point is if something happened with the house fire, but I fixed it everything.
Yeah.
You still have to disclose.
Yeah.
Doesn't fire.
Yeah. But I rectified it. You know what I mean? I brought it back up to code. I had it inspected, whatever you did, you know what I mean? Here you go. Here's the paperwork, right? That's why people love and hate grow-ups, because with the grow-ups, you have to go back and you have to remediate so much. Like there's a lot of moisture in the property, a lot of mold damage, usually because they're cutting big holes and they're pumping a lot of like moisture into the air to grow those plants inside. And even when you remediate it, you still have to disclose that it was a grow-up. Right? So that stigma stays with the property, right? But it's okay. Over time, it fades away. But that's why I say you have to disclose it to let people know. Oh, I have this real estate disclosure checklist. I found this and I thought this was nice. It's just something to go over. So what items? No material latent defects. Yes, you have to disclose them. Foundation issues, mold behind walls, leaking basement, not visible during showing. Patent defects, no. But like I say, even though it says no, it doesn't mean you're going to try and hide it or not disclose it, especially if you're directly asked about it. But buyers expected to discover during showing or home inspection. Okay. Death or natural or suicide in the property. For us, not really required for us to disclose it. But if we're asked directly, you have to document the conversation. You have to, if someone's coming for your listing and giving you an offer and you've got that clause in there, you have to ask your client before you get them to sign the paperwork. Be like, oh, they included this clause so nobody's ever died in the property to your knowledge and, or committed suicide, natural or unnatural. Make sure you're not getting them to sign off on that clause. Violent crime or criminal activity. Again, not required, same as above, if asked directly, be truthful. But I know from fact of an agent that got fined because it was just in the neighborhood, right? So even though they say not required, RICO, but they can still come down on you for some reason.
How much they find?
I don't know, like 10,000 or something like that. Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy. I know, it is crazy. Yeah. Actually, I think it was more than 10,000 when I really think about it. It was up in Brampton, and I think it was equivalent to whatever commission he had made on it. He had to give it back. Yeah. Yeah. Because of there was the whole neighborhood apparently knew about it, and the guy was like across the street, but it wasn't the actual house that he had sold. And I remembered, and I'm like, how do you get? It's not even the property that you sold. So that's why I say Google search before you prepare your offers or before you post your listings. And House Creep, housecreep.com is a good one. Again, grow up or meth labs. Yep, we have to disclose that. Even if it's remediated, like we were talking about, as per RICO guidance. Water damage, yes, that's another one, or past flooding. Structural repairs, fire or smoke damage. These are all yeses for us. Mold, asbestos, oil tanks buried or decommissioned. Septic issues or well contamination, big ones too. Zoning noncompliance or bylaw violations. So these are, even from the buyer side, you should be going like if you walk through a property and your buyer goes, is that fence on the property line, or do you think they pulled a permit for that deck? Now you've been asked the question, and you ask the listing agent, he goes, I don't know, I don't think so. I think it's fine. It's been there for years. You can't go back and say it's been there for years. Your buyers directly asked you. You have to be a little proactive. Maybe you're going to call the city, see if there was ever a permit pulled on it, or if they complied with whatever zoning, compliance or whatever for the area. If there's a heritage designation, you have to disclose. Renovations without permits, right? Because they might be asked to take it down after the fact, right? Like if somebody puts up a deck and it's a beautiful deck and your buyer's buying it because they absolutely love it. And then when they move in, they realize that the neighbors complain and now the city's after them to take down the deck because there was no permit pulled or it's not put up to code for some reason, or it's encroaching on somebody's property. That'll be really sad for that buyer. That buyer is definitely going to come back after you, right? So, or any pest infestations, past or current. So again, this is just the bottom of this where you talk about that seller property information statement. Have you guys ever seen the seller property information statement? I have it here. You can pull it for you guys. So it's not. You can choose to put it on your listing. When you load your listing, it says SPIS, yes or no. Oh, I never load it with my listing. I don't. I always put no. It's not that I'm not using this document. This document's a good document. And even if I don't bring it with me, generally I know what questions we're going to be asking the seller, right? So it's really good to bring with you just to get in that habit, because then you know that you're doing your due diligence to ask the right questions when you're listing the property, because then you're gonna discover your disclosures and your patent and latent defects and your stigmas, right? So I've owned the property from, right? Does any other party have ownership or spousal interest in the property? Is the property a condominium, freehold, parcel of tied land? I can't tell you, since I joined this brokerage, this is a very, very common thing that people aren't asking their clients. You have to be a smart agent. When you walk on, even though it might be a detached home, you got to recognize parcel of tied land. So you have to be able to ask the question, because your client will forget. They won't mention it. You know what I mean? They'll say, oh yeah, no problem. Here, listed at this. It's going to be mislisted property. We've had a few complaints about that. Yeah.
POTI. Can you explain why is called as a freehold even though we have a monthly fee?
Because parcel of tied land. So there's something that ties it together. So even though it's a freehold property, right? Maybe there's a mutual driveway they use to come in to those 5 homes, and that needs to be maintained. So collectively, they have to maintain it. There's something that ties those properties together. Each individual property is their freehold, right? Like in a condo, for instance, the condo board will say, we're going to do the windows. You don't have a choice. Even if you want a different door on your hallway, for instance, you don't have a choice because they want everything uniform and the same. Freehold, you have the right to do anything to your property. It's your property inside and out, but there's something that ties them together. That's why POTL, parcel of tied land. So that could be a number of things. Sometimes there's properties you see, street, yeah, absolutely.
So the garbage removed.
Exactly.
The city property will come there.
Exactly.
They have to have different.
Exactly, yeah. But it can be like maybe they were all built around a golf course, you know what I mean, or a park that has to be maintained, or something that ties them together. There's so many different things. It'd be a parcel of tied land.
When you could offer
Mhm.
to buy, still, you need the status certificate for the property.
Yes. Yeah.
So status certificate is the same thing we need for the condo townhouse.
Yes.
In that sense, this when it doesn't make sense, it's called freehold. Freehold should not be any.
Because the thing is that with a condominium, 100% of your dwelling isn't yours. So like I say, like if I want to put a different door or if I want to put different windows, even sometimes like I can't even put up a different color curtain because condominiums want to see that the building looks uniform and it's all the same and they're keeping everybody the standard. So the reason why I say it's freehold because the dwelling itself, the property itself is freehold, right? 100%.
Only the outside.
Only something ties them together. Something ties these 5 houses or these 20 houses together because they all have to maintain this one thing. Like I say, there's what's the name of the street now? I can't think of it. It's like Midland, St. Clair area. I sold a property, freehold town, but it has a parcel of tied land because the road coming in to get to all of those, you can't get into those townhouses. It's kind of like the ones at Vic Park and St. Clair too, Spring something. Those are, sorry?
I know one is Windy and St. Clair. You go inside on the south side of the St. Clair, there's a 20-year townhouses.
Yeah. And so, yeah, exactly, because they need the parking maintained. They need someone to do the gardens, to mow the lawn, to like shovel in the winter. You know what I mean? There's something that ties those properties together that makes it a parcel of tied land.
And not only that, in condos, you cannot do any changes within the unit.
Yeah, you have to have,
TOTL, it's a freehold. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah, exactly.
So even if you want to put a second kitchen in a condo town or whatever, you have to get a permission, and also they would give. But TOTL, you can have it. It's like a freehold. You can have it.
Yeah, as long as you're getting a permit from the city. But yeah, exactly. 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But I know exactly. Exactly. Right. Yeah.
Like the process, like how is it? Usually, everybody know that like build like on a kitchen or a deck. They don't really get permits from the city.
A lot of people don't, I know.
Like, how, if I were to get it, like it looks like I feel like I have to wait like a year for them.
No, permits don't necessarily take that long.
No, right? Oh. I don't know.
So I religiously pull permits for anything I'm doing because I have my mom on one side and the worst neighbor in the neighborhood on the other side. And I hope she's listening. But anyways, absolutely. So I don't move unless I pull a permit. You know what I mean? I had to take a tree down, got a permit. I had to put a shed up. And even the guy said to me, you're within the guideline. I said, I don't care. Give me a permit. I'll just give a little couple hundred extra just so she can pull permit. So I know it. They really don't take that long. They take long if you're looking for a variance, if you're looking to do something outside of a normal permit. And most of the time your contractors, if they're used to pulling them, they get them done pretty fast. Like you just sign this form that they can obtain a permit on your behalf and they go and they get it for you and it's not so bad. Yeah. So yeah. Anyway, so this SPIS, if you guys haven't seen it, is really good. So you can see, is this property subject to first right of refusal for lease or whatever, land lease? Are there any encroachments? Is there a plan or a survey? Do you have the copy of the survey? How many of you got to the end of your deal and the buyer asked you, do you have the survey? And you're like, oh shoot, I never asked my seller. Right? So this gets it done at the very, very beginning. Do you have a survey? Are there any disputes concerning the boundaries of the property? Are you aware of any non-compliant zoning issues? You guys kind of get it here. And it goes on and it'll ask you, have you done any renovations? Anything we should know about the property? Whatever. So it's a 2-pager document. It's good. Like I said, you don't have to fill it out and get your client to sign. There's an initial there of the buyer to let you know the SPIS if you do pull it up with your listing. But start to use it even just like I say at your listing appointments when you're closing it, because you're going to find out and discover a lot of stuff. Like, you know what I mean? Even right here, I know every time we sell a property with a wood burning stove or something, I play, do you have it wet certified, right? Like, how do you remember these questions? Go through the SPIS and check it out. Good documents. Okay, and then we were talking about that seller disclosure document. Okay, if you discover there is something that you have to disclose, a latent defect, you should be filling out this form, right? If it's something that even if they fix it, you still have to disclose it because you know it now. But you should tell them, okay, look, we're just going to fill out this form, the seller disclosure. So you put the property, your name, brokerage, date, whatever, the client or consumer name, prospective buyer. You can put this at the end, but get client to fill this out. And then you're going to put what's wrong with the property. So is it structural defect? Okay, I know that the foundation is cracked in the south side of the house and leaks in spring. Property systems, sump pump doesn't always work and kind of backs up. You know what I mean? Property improvements. I put the big deck on the back, but I didn't get a permit for it. Disclose, right? It may be fine. That buyer might buy it and not be bothered for the next 40 years living at the property if nobody complains about it. But just in case, right? You want to put on there, you did renovation, kitchen in the basement, didn't pull a permit, or other. So you've got a chance to put in anything other than those 3 things. Has anybody ever used this form? Right.
I feel like I didn't put on the 60.
You don't have to load it with your listing, but you still should be doing a disclosure. You could say call listing agent for disclosure, right? Or call listing agent for whatever. And definitely at the time, this is not something you can do after you do the deal. They should be disclosed to them at the offer time. You know what I mean? As early as possible. All right. So we're going to go on house creep real quick. I know you guys I always like it. They changed it the last time I tried to do this demonstration though. And I know the search was giving me trouble. Creep. Stigmatized properties and noteworthy homes, right? Are in the way. So find a city. We can do Toronto, sure. You could also put in the address. No, I don't want to become a VIP. I mean, there's so many ads on it now. But anyways, you have to go and familiarize yourself with this. It's really, really good. Oh, here you go. Enter an address. There it is. Whoops. Let's see if it works. Let's just do 150 consumers. Consumers Drive, and I'm in the state here. But anyways, you can go fool around with it. Honestly, I last time I used it a couple months ago when I was doing this training, they totally changed the website on me. But go and try and figure it out because I want it to work. I know I had done it for my house and I was like, oh my God, I remember that happened in the 90s. Like they had gone back pretty far. Maybe it's housecreep.ca. Kind of feels like I'm on House Creep.
I usually Google.
Sorry?
I usually, if I put any offer or something.
Google is your best friend. You go in 100%. Yeah. I'm just trying to see here real quick. Where is the search bar now? I know this says city up here. Anyways, they changed it there. But you can find a city. You can't put in the address. Okay, go and try and find your house on it. I don't want to waste time on here looking for the search bar, but who says even if you do a Google search?
Christine, can we change on that? Like it says on the right side, it says, can you click the drop down and see whether you have
keyword, latitude, longitude? No. I'm looking for address. Hey, Ranjit?
Yep.
But it's not there. It's just keyword, latitude, longitude. There used to be, the search bar was right here when you came into it. Hopefully they didn't make it like something you have to pay for now because it's gotten popular over the years. All the agents are using it. But go check it out because I know I've checked out my own address on it before and it was pretty neat. Like I say, it went back pretty far. And then, like I say, if you want to, you can do Google search. You know what I mean? I wonder, what was the address of the property on Vermorton? Do you remember? Anyways, you should look at 812. Let's try 812 Vermorton.
Or 112.
No, not helpful. But anyways, you could look it up. I don't know if it's going to come up. This is going to be like mostly Remax, listing.ca, House Sigma, stuff like that. Look up an address that you know that there's a problem with or that there's been a fire. If you know something happened in your neighborhood, do a Google search of it, and it'll come up. Like I say, that problem that I had at my last brokerage with that agent in Brampton that sold, their thing was that it was very easily sound by Google search. Just go on Google and you see that there was this huge drug bust that happened in that neighborhood and you're supposed to know about it. So even though it's something that they say RICO technically doesn't say you have to disclose it because it's a stigma in the property, you can still get burned for it by showing that you easily found out and you should have known. And once you prove that you know, they say you should have disclosed, right? How's everybody online? Does everybody fully understand the difference there between patent and latent defects? I always joke that I'm walk through properties like this because I'm so used to like looking for things like cracks and mold in the ceiling and what happened, and you know, and then when you see it, you're going to investigate. Oh, there's a black spot on the ceiling there. Right enough, you go upstairs. There's a bathroom right on top. You know what to ask those questions for your clients, right? Because at the end of the day, they're not used to walking through properties like we are. We take for granted that we get really used to these things. Like I can walk in and I can tell an asbestos floor right away, you know, just by the material. You know, over the years I've gotten used to it. I can walk in and go, oh, this floor is asbestos in older homes and like East York and stuff like that. You guys got to get used to seeing these things to pick it out for your clients and know to ask the right questions, right?
Good one is 112.
Was it 112?
Yeah.
If we Google search it, I wonder if it comes up that it was a fire in that property. Let's see. I know though, as soon as we listed the property, like I say, our colleague was like, oh yeah, you totally listed that house that was on fire. He lived in the neighborhood. So imagine that if we didn't disclose it, the buyer would get the same reaction from all the neighbors, right? As soon as they start moving and they start talking to the neighbors. Morton. Depends how serious the fire is. How Stigma. And it doesn't come up on here. But anyways, do your Google search, try and do your research, ask the right questions, do your disclosures. And I know it's hard. Your sellers are always going to think that it's horrible. It's going to ruin their sale. Just tell them, like, at the end of the day, if it's going to bother that person that you do the disclosure to and they don't end up giving an offer, way better than if they put an offer and move in and the close are now angry about it. Much more bigger implications after the fact, after they close and they're angry, right? Big lawsuits, lose your license. And every time you guys have a complaint about you, you know, it shows up on RICO. You guys can go into RICO and search and see what agents are rogue out there and what kind of complaints they've had on them. So your due diligence. Everybody good online? Yeah, I know. They don't even put their camera on. Hello, everybody. If everybody's good online, I'll let you guys go for this morning. Have a lovely morning. Good morning, Miss Day. Here, everyone. I'll talk to you soon.
Yep. Everything is good.
Okay, good, Brendan. Thanks. Have a good morning.
You too.